Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, and everybody inside and outside the ballpark. My name is NovedPlayer, and welcome to episode 60. That's the right one. Episode 60 of the Noved Notes podcast, where we talk about many different creators and communities inside the platform. I'm your host, and today I have the lead for one of the amazing film studios of VRChat. We have Khangaluwu from Studio Penrose. Khang, welcome in. Hope
Hi.
you're doing well.
Thank you. Hope you're doing well too. Thanks for having me on board. I love these sort of podcasts.
Yeah, of course. No, it's lovely to have you here. So for the general listening audience, what exactly do you do inside of VRChat?
Yeah, so I run Studio Penrose, which is a virtual film studio. We mainly produced like fictional VR chat films, and we upload them to YouTube. We often spend most of the year working on these things, even though people don't realize them, because we're usually in like the pre-production stage. But yeah, so we're a VR film studio, and direct films.
Oh, fair enough. And I was gonna say, because obviously, with Studio Penrose and VRChat filmmaking, there was obviously something that kind of sparked that interest. So, what kind of got you interested in, before we get into the filmmaking side, what actually got you interested in VRChat in the first place?
Yeah, so I'm one of the older VR chat players. I think the very first time I like ever played VR chat was in, I want to say 2017. And at the time it was like I played on my laptop, it was on desktop, and I mainly played because like some of my friends from my old friend group we found it and we're like, oh, that's kind of funny. Like there's like little avatars and stuff like that. And so I mainly joined the game just to, play it like a game. Took a hiatus because I started college, but then I came back to it in 2018-19 or something like that, where I actually got like VR and started playing it like, like the actual game is meant to be played, not just like messing around and running around.
I gotcha. Yeah, I'd say a lot of people do start on desktop and then eventually transition into VR. Well, that's cool. I'll say, what got you specifically into like VR chat filmmaking then?
Yeah. So I've always been into film, but I've never really had the opportunity to like pursue it. In real life, trying to get like film equipment, camera equipment, actors, it's all very complicated and very like money consuming. And so I wasn't really able to do anything like that. I've always liked animation, but that also takes a lot of time to learn and it's very difficult and doesn't always look the greatest until you're like good at it. And then, once I actually started playing VR chat, I noticed that some people could like make videos on the game. And it was actually a film by someone named Acme Jack. It was called Derailed, is what actually got me like to try it out for the first time. Basically, Derailed is one of the like earlier VR chat films, and I kind of credit it as one of the first like ones that actually felt like a film. There were like role plays for that lasted for like hours that people uploaded and stuff like that, but this one actually had like cinematic qualities to it. And I saw that, I was like, whoa, it reminds me of Machinima because I came from the Machinima days when that was what I used to watch. And from that point on, I tried making video content on, and that's kind of where the filmmaking stuff started. It's way back when, and man, I don't even know what year that was. It's gotta be like 2020 or something. I don't know. I probably did the math way wrong on that date, but
That's all good. Well, that's cool. Yeah, Machinima is um, definitely a lot of VR chat players, at least like in our age range. Um, it's I could definitely see how that could inspire, or like Rooster Teeth, or any of those bigger names out there when it comes to like YouTube content and stuff. Well, that's cool. I was gonna say, so obviously, um, what were some of the things that like happened when you first started wanting to make filmmaking? Like, what was like the start of like your films, essentially?
yeah. So I first started with a series that was called LPD Files, and basically it was like this crime web. I kind of consider it like a web series. It was like a two-episode thing about like a police officer that was trying to track down like a villain essentially, and it was more just for fun. And when I first started doing that project, it was like things were very different. So I saw Derailed, and I started working on that film, LPD files, and that film had I had no help, like in terms of like learning how to film in VR. I had one camera person. Carrot was the person I worked with. Is their name? Actually, you know Carrot,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
yeah. But me and him and a couple others, Lofty, Calvin, and Four are the names I worked very closely with that film. And yeah, it was weird. It was very experimental. Like we had no procedures. I wasn't using the camera because at the time my computer just couldn't handle me trying to film stuff, and so I let all the camera stuff to them, and it was just very experimental, and slow with a lot of reshoots and a lot of filming.
Yeah, fair. I mean, that's typical for VRChat films, right? There's always reshoots and um, constant. Oh well, let's do this one more time. We'll do one for safety. Okay, one last one for safety. There's always a lot of reshoots. Um, I would say, especially because we've had another studio with Portal Media. We've had a few of their members come on and kind of explain some of the things. Big shout out to Verch, Gurzy, and James. Um, specifically Gurzy because I know their pain when it comes to the upcoming film, the sequel to What If Life Was a Fever Dream. I actually in the trailer, I it was kind of spoiled in the trailer, but I actually got a body acting role for that film, so I'm actually really excited to see,
Ooh.
yeah, how the full film comes out. I'm excited for it. Um, but so I guess kind of one of the things, because you've been doing it for quite a while now, so what was it like starting out? Because obviously with VR chat, right, we've had many different prefabs and assets come out over the years to kind of simplify filmmaking and shooting videos inside of VR. So what were kind of like in the very beginning? What was kind of some of the things you used in that sense?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember exactly, but I'm pretty sure we started out using, I think, the VRC lens that exists at the time. So, because like I wasn't the one using the camera, Carrot mainly was, and I believe Carrot actually did use VRC lens back then. So we've always like been involved with using like VRC lens. For those that are not fully aware, like VRC lens is essentially a DSLR camera that is, part of your avatar that can be added to your avatar. It allows like all the camera controls that you would find on a DSLR camera, so like focal length, aperture control, like stuff like that. Turns the VRChat camera into a more like detailed sort of controllable camera. But so we used that back then. And like the biggest like difference I can really think of between like what we do now versus what we did then in terms of just like the technical stuff is back when we were filming my first films, we didn't really care. Like we care in the sense of like we weren't like super perfectionists with like body acting. We didn't, we really didn't know what we were doing fully. So our film sessions were, a little slow and ill coordinated. And in our defense too, we didn't like there weren't a lot of filmmakers at all back then. In fact, there were like maybe you can count them on one hand. You know, and so we were just kind of like learning as we went. And yeah, that's about what I can remember is like the camera differences. But there's a lot more differences in terms of like procedures and what we've like kind of figured out in terms of like the filmmaking procedures from back then to now.
Yeah, absolutely. And that kind of goes into, some of the Penrose films as well. Because with Penrose Protocol, you guys did in fact remaster it as well.
Mhm.
Which one of the questions I wanted to ask, granted, I've watched both, but it's been a while, obviously, since I've seen the original, um, you know, versus the remaster version. So I guess kind of, for the general listening audience, what were some of the things that may have not been caught? What were some of the things that were remastered, compared to like the original?
Oh, I was muted the whole time. Whoops. So the Penrose Protocol's like original version was released, I want to say a year and a half ago or something like that. And the re-release tackled a couple different things. So the biggest one is there was an additional scene added to the beginning of the film, as well as a replacement of the scene added at the end, to make the film more connected to the rest of what we're working on in the future. But also to kind of make the plot make a little bit more sense. Like the opening scene shows the villain, her name was Lilith, going to a medical like corporation headquarters and taking data from them. And that's what kind of is the conflict point throughout the film. We didn't originally have that scene; just kind of jumped right into the like stalking part, where a protagonist stalks the antagonist. But we added that scene because we felt like it was, kind of that was one of our mistakes. Is I think we should have had a scene like that. And there's two more like major changes. The second one is like the entire film sound design was essentially like enhanced. Especially during like the fight scene, and we also like replaced one of the soundtracks. These were upgraded by Scarlett, our sound designer. We were like, hey, we're redoing the film anyways. Do you want to redo it? Like the sound design, she's like, yes, because she learned quite a lot since that time. And I don't have the BTS footage yet. We were like thinking of doing behind the scenes of Protocol's like sound design, just because it's kind of unique to like see this stuff. But basically, Scarlett would just like she likes to record a lot of her fully like on her own, and so for the fight scene, she like started beating like steaks and stuff to make the like the meat sounds, when you get
Oh,
punched.
really?
Yeah, and she recorded herself doing it because she thought it'd be like hilarious to do it. And so we do have like behind the scenes footage of stuff like that. But yeah, the sound design was redone, and the fight scene is where it's most noticeable. And the very last thing that I think is the more noticeable like change was the fight sequence had some okay. So the original one was not sped up at all. Like there were no parts that were sped up, and we found that like it feels a little slow if you don't do that. I don't really like super speeding footage because it feels fake. Like if you speed up footage like 10 times, it just doesn't look right. But what we figured out works is if you splice to certain points, you can speed it up to like 110%, just a little bit, to 120%. And it'll make the fight scene feel a lot more energetic and flowy. And that's exactly what we did. Like we didn't speed up the whole sequence. We sped up like certain hits, and it looks a lot better. It goes hand in hand with the sound update. So
Oh, I gotcha. Well, it's I kind of agree with you on the sense of like not super speeding footage, unless if it's like absolutely necessary. You know, like I guess one of the examples, because obviously with this podcast, it has a bunch of visuals. I'll throw things on the screen. And if it's like a long-winded thing that obviously wouldn't fit within like the time frame that we're talking about this subject, yeah, I'll speed it up, I'll splice it, do whatever I need to. You know, like some of the events related ones that I've, had the pleasure of recording or got footage from them. Obviously, I'm not going to put a whole hour, ow. Obviously, I'm not going to put a whole hour worth of footage on top of the, hour long podcast. So I'm going to take key events from it and, if it seems like it's going too slow, I'll speed it up just kind of, it's supposed to be display essentially. It's not supposed to tell a story. Obviously, if you're telling the story, you want to make sure the details are there. Which to this day, I have to give kudos to your guys' team for that fight sequence because it is very well done. Definitely.
Thank you.
I don't like to rank scenes in films only because like I don't like to hurt people's feelings, but I will say with Penrose Protocol it is easily within the top 5 fight scenes that I've seen recorded on VRChat, hands down. It's definitely crazy. I've over the past like I don't know 2-3 years, it's just been more and more fight scenes are getting recorded for films or whatever the case may be. Oh my gosh, I love them. Because as a VRChat player, we understand how difficult it can be for those. For the general public, it's a lot of people think it's like CGI or animated, but they don't understand these are full, actors, full body actors, and stuff like that. this is kind of a small
Oh
tangent,
yeah.
but funny enough, before we had actually started recording, I had told you, but I went. It's Sunday, St. Patrick's Day, whatever you want to call it when we're filming this. So I went over to my parents and started to go eat over there because they wanted to invite me, yada yada. So I talked about because my stepmother, love her, if she ever sees this, hi. But she supports the podcast and stuff, and she actually bought one of my hoodies very recently. So she was asking how the podcast's going and like if I have any upcoming people coming up. She's not a VR chat player, but she's interested in learning more about VR and whatnot. And I was like, yeah, I'm interviewing this this Kong guy, trying to. They're like, oh, like what do they do? And I'm like, oh yeah, it's like VR filmmaking. Like, oh, that sounds cool. And I was like, yeah, and I was trying to trying to go home because I wanted to do some research. Um, but man, I love when my controller just decides to fall out of my hand.
Oh,
Wrist
same.
straps, people. But so I actually had showed her the Penrose protocol as well as
Oh, okay.
voicemail, which is which is the point I'm trying to make, and she understood that it was like because she was asking a bunch of questions and all within within reason, there wasn't like outlandish. um she threw a fit at both the pro tag and the end tag. Spoiler alert, if you haven't seen it yet, this is your time to go watch it. uh but having both of them die in the end, she's like, they're both dead. And I'm like,
Do they
yeah.
die though?
I was like, kinda, like she was getting into it, like especially Penrose Protocol. She was getting into it, and I was enjoying every second because I was trying to do research, and then I was watching her reaction. And I'm like, you know what, this is content in itself. but but because obviously with VRChat filmmaking, it is. I don't want to say it's still new because it's been around for a few years now, but it's definitely a market when it comes to filmmaking in general that's still very new-ish.
Yep.
So to see these films come out, and it's full body acted, and everything like that, it's really crazy what people can do.
Oh, yeah.
Because obviously, with some of the films out there, they got these crazy like VFX and special effects, and it's some of it's not even edits. It's VR chat worlds and using VRC lens or dollies or whatever the case may be. Especially now with VR chat having these new camera features come out, like the dolly system, um, which is still in beta, but it's definitely a cool thing. Now they have the drone thing as well. Um,
Yep. Mhm.
so kind of to go back into topic, of course, I know the tangents. But now as you kind of progress through the years of filmmaking, um, what are some of the improvements when it came to like camera systems and stuff you've used for the films?
Oh yeah, there's been quite a lot. So I think I kind of mentioned earlier, like the camera stuff. We still use VRC lens. We basically like all of us really have ever since we started. But one thing that has like changed is we have a lot more features with VRC lens that we as a studio like added onto it. But we also use more of the existing features as well. So the biggest thing I'd like to give a shout out to is Peach Bite, dev coordinator or dev person for her group Seventh Circle Labs. She did like an edit of the VRC lens that has like more control to it. She added like enhanced smoothing for like stabilization. She added like uh, things to the drone to make it more controllable. She does a lot of stuff to like the camera that to help like filmmaking. So love her, shout out to her for that. So like that's one of the things. But also, when we first used the camera, like we didn't really use more than just like the basics of it. But nowadays, I use a lot of the features like in every film. The main one being manual focus. Like it's always been something I've used. Once I figured out that it was a thing. But and once I could actually like film myself. But manual focus is something that like is super important to film. It allows you to do focal shifts. It allows you to make your films look a lot more cinematic, for lack of better phrasing. And I want more people to use it. And so like that's one of the things I advocate for a lot is like even the baseline features of the VRC lens without like any enhancements, like they're really good. And just in case you're curious too, because like this is something I get asked quite a lot, is like why use VRC lens over VRChat's camera or like vice versa. And so from like a technical standpoint, or I guess from a filmmaker standpoint, there's a couple of differences that I don't think a lot of people really notice. The biggest one is VRChat's default camera doesn't have post-processing control. With VRC lens, we can actually remove post-processing for like the world, because every world, or not every, but like a lot of worlds have like post-processing, like color grading added into the world. And if you're editing footage, you kind of don't want that because it'll often make like darks too dark or brights too bright, like that sort of thing. And another thing that was like different is the way focus looks in VRChat. So if you've ever taken like photos in VRChat with like the focusing, you'll see that like oftentimes there's like this weird halo that kind of surrounds your avatar, and the focus just looks different, like the backgrounds do. And VRChat or VRC Lens's camera has a different like style. It looks a lot more, I guess, close to like cameras in real life. So that's why we use it, and that's why I personally use it. But I with the new released cameras that and like the updates that VRChat's been using or doing to their cameras, like the dolly system was a huge improvement, and then the drone, like it improved quite a bit. Like it's getting there. Like the VRChat's default camera's getting there. Something that I need to like always remind myself too is VRChat's camera it's meant for everyone, and so you don't need to have all these intricacies that us filmmakers care about. But even so, VRChat's making an effort to like improve the camera, which we really appreciate. It helps the new people that come into the game who want to do like videos and stuff like that, who don't know like how to add avatar stuff like VRC lens and stuff. It makes it a lot easier for them to start making videos. So yeah, that's the kind of technical improvements that we've worked with.
Yeah, for sure. And obviously, there's so many assets out there now that people have made to help, film studios and filmmakers alike. Um, I mean, I remember I don't know if you remember back in the day of the original VRChat camera that, it was just the janky buttons and everything, and it was a pain. Like the VRChat camera has came such a long way, when it comes to everything. It's definitely crazy, Granted, this game's been around for 10 years now, over 10 years now. But the
Yeah, I
fact that
forget that sometimes.
right, like what other games do you know out there are still going after 10 years, besides like Call of Duty? There's not many you can name. Or at least what I should say is still have an increasing concurrent player base after 10 years.
Yep.
So I guess kind of to go more into the studio side. So obviously you are the lead of Studio Penrose. So I guess kind of one of the first things. So what kind of got you started with Studio Penrose? Like what made you want to create Studio Penrose?
Yeah, so Studio Penrose was, man, I always forget the date. But it was formed, I want to say it's about 2 years ago now, over 2 years ago. And at the time, I worked with a different studio previously, and I wanted to go independent because when you work for other people and other studios, you can get restricted in content. Sometimes, content doesn't fit. And so we were like, yeah, let's just, go independent. Our content will be able to, survive on and fit better
Creative
with like the
differences.
lore in the world and stuff like that. Yeah, essentially, yeah. And so with Studio Penrose being formed, we now were able to build our universe, like essentially, because um, not all, or okay, so technically, it's not a plan to have every single Penrose film be in the same universe, but most of what we do is like in the same universe. So all our films take place, all of them right now, take place in what's called like the city of New Millennia, which is like kind of our New York City, if you will. Um, And though not every film like revolves around that point being like the center point of the film, they all just kind of take place in there, so we can like do stuff to justify like films existing and lore and like cameos and stuff like that just for fun. So yeah, like I guess that was one of the main things, and then having everyone kind of still work on these films together. It's really nice to be on a like an independent studio.
No, of course. Yeah, that I mean that makes perfect sense because obviously Studio Penrose has had a good handful of films come out, from 2022 on. So kind of going, in that timeline a little bit, because if I remember correctly, the first one you had put out was In a Perfect World, which was I believe 2022. If I remember correctly,
Mhm.
that sounds about right. So what kind of made you want to create In a Perfect World?
Yeah, In a Perfect World's a weird one because it's actually like considered one of the studio's like legacy films. It was made before Studio Penrose was a thing. The first like Studio Penrose film was actually Emergence, but I made In a Perfect World like many whatever date you said was like when I made it. And it was meant to actually be a test bed for a film that we were working on at the time with my old studio. And so I made it to the channel and just rebranded the channel. But so with In a Perfect World, it was like I said, it was meant to be a test bed for a film. And so I wanted to like kind of get used to like changing the style of like filmmaking I used to do because I used to work on LPD files type stuff, so like thriller, whatever. And I wanted to slow the pace down a little bit, and that was one of the films I used to kind of test that out. And it's kind of weird because you can like see a lot of changes from In a Perfect World to the most recent film we're working on, not just in like technical stuff, but also in like the like creative choices. In a Perfect World has like still cameras. Like I call them dummy cams. I don't know if that's like the film correct phrase, but basically just cameras on tripods. I just drop the camera and leave it there, like anime. They will use a lot of that because handhelds aren't really a thing when you animate as much.
Right.
So that film has a lot of still cams. It has a lot of like wide shots, which I usually like to do to show like emptiness. And there's a lot of camera movement choices that are framing choices that are also very similar to what I use now. But it was more just for fun.
No, that's fair. Um, yeah, I mean, it's definitely a crazy thing when it comes to, you know, because obviously um I'm not a filmmaker by any means. I know filmmakers, I talk to filmmakers, I body act for filmmakers, but obviously I'm not a filmmaker. There's been many different panels events when it comes to like VR chat and filmmakers giving panels and stuff. I know one of them, which I believe I think you were there. I don't remember if you were there, but I know you've heard about it at least. But in Project Fest 24, Gerzibo actually did have a panel, which that VOD is out now. Haha. Segue. But no, but kind of going over different types of shots, different camera angles, stuff like that. Because not only does he do it with VR, but he also does a little bit of IRL filmmaking or filmography as well. Which is kind
Ooh.
of cool to say the least. That have your passions not only in real life but also in VR too, and it's a completely different ball game. Um, so I guess kind of to move on a little bit from In a Perfect World, because obviously the next one, which is more the psychological horror genre, which would be Voicemail, which was later in 2022. So what kind of made you want to go more into the psychological horror, that's a word.
Oh yeah. So Voicemail. There's two films that were made at my previous studio that I transferred over to Studio Penrose. Voicemail was one of those, and the original uh, Penrose Protocol was another one. But with Voicemail, we that was actually the first film I did at my previous studio, and I wanted to try something simple and easy to do, or we yeah, easy to do, right? But I wanted to try something more simple and different than my normal stuff because I at the time I'd been working on more emotional type films and projects, and I wanted to take something a little bit different. And so we also wanted to try to attend HorrorCon, which was a thing back then. Right now it's of course but it's part of PJK team now, right, or something like
Yep.
that.
Yep.
Yeah.
We work with them.
But
Yeah.
yeah. So I that was like the one of the driving forces too, was like HorrorCon's doing a thing, and I was like, I don't know anything about horror, but I want to try it out. And so I had a dream, or a nightmare rather, or I've had nightmares about like kind of the similar subject matter to voicemail. Something happens to a partner, or everyone has like nightmares like that, I think. And so I turned that into kind of like what the film was about. And voicemail is very interesting because it was filmed in 2 weeks. It took an extra 2 weeks for writing and dev, and in total, it's like production cycle was like about a month. And to me, like now, that's like insane because that's a lot of work in a little amount of time.
Hello, everyone. Real quick, just want to pause the episode right here. I want to thank you all so much for the amazing support when it comes to the Noved Squad and the Noved Notes podcast. We are now officially in the creator economy, which you can kind of see right behind me. You can now officially tip the podcast, or if you're interested to do monthly subscriptions with more benefits and perks for the world and upcoming projects, feel free to check it out at the group page, Noved.6608 for the group page. Of course, if you're enjoying what you're watching, feel free to hit that subscribe button down below. But let's get back into the episode. Woo!
Voicemail was a lot more simple in terms of like, the premise and the plot. But it was still like kind of technically interesting. There's a lot of stuff that we did in that film that is like still really unique and stuff that I haven't had the chance to do again. I'll just highlight a couple of them because they were kind of fun at the time. There's a scene where the main character like is walking vertical, or not. Everyone walks vertically, right? Usually. He was walking like straight, and then they like kind of trip and fall sideways. And at the time, the horizon adjust for VRChat's like IK was released, and so that was how that shot was done. And not only that, but I believe we we had to have the camera fall alongside the character. I actually don't remember exactly how we did that. I think it was using a dolly, but I don't know 100%. So like that was just a really interesting shot that like was kind of neat. And we spliced two shots together to get, the person walking normally then falling sideways. And another kind of unique thing was Peach Bite developed a couple of like weird little, so we call them doors, where you can like kind of position the shape of these like quote unquote doors, and they form like a light object or a void. And so there's a shot in there where a character falls, or after they fall sideways, they kind of fall and land onto this like road bridge. And they fall originally in the void, but the void fades away, which allows for the bridge to show up. That is one of those things where you can easily do it via green screen. But I want to do it more practical so it'd look a little bit more fitting in the world. And so that's exactly what we did. And so we had a person kind of jump from a height, not in real life, but in like VR, and then they kind of landed, and then void disappears and reveals the location. So I always credit this film to be one of my favorites in terms of the like creativity, not just in the like technical shots, but also the dev side, because we did a lot of weird stuff that we never had done before. And I like with me and the team that made this, it was so cool at the time. Like, and I still find it really cool, but it was like super super cool at the time because we never had done that before.
No, fair. I mean, yeah. Would you say that was like the experimental short film, to say the least?
Oh, it was very experimental. Like, sorry, I also forgot to mention, because you mentioned like, oh, what compelled you to do horror? I had not done horror before. Like, so this was the first time I'd done it, and I learned quite a lot about it because of this film. Scarlett, our sound designer that I mentioned earlier, I've been working with her like ever since I started filmmaking. Like me and her have like every film she's had some sort of involvement in, pretty much. And she enlightened me in how important sound design is for horror. And I never really like realized it because I'm not a huge horror fan. But I did some research into horror films, and she's like, "Hey, pay attention to audio." Like, and she's right. Like, half of what's really scary about horror films is the audio. If you remove the audio and you do like some weird music or whatever, it just doesn't fit. It removes the horror, out of horror. And so that was one of the huge things I learned was that. And nowadays, I'll give another shout out. D Ghostly is a director with their studio as well, and they are a huge horror fan, and most of their films are planned to be like horror in some way. And so, um, I've learned quite a lot from them after voicemail about like horror and how it's done.
Yep. I was gonna say, yep, if you want to learn more about D Ghostly, I totally forgot that. I'm D Ghostly, if you ever see this, I'm so sorry. But go check out his episode. I'll put the thumbnail right here. Go check out that episode. Yeah, no, because that was it was right after like Raindance and stuff. He had won Raindance and stuff, which that film hands down probably one of the coolest horror films that I've seen to date. At least on the newer side of things. Um, and I know, dude, it's kind of crazy, like how much he has improved when it comes to, like his stuff, because he's worked with a few different other filmmakers as well, and it's kind of crazy. They grow up so fast, no, but but it's kind of cool to see so many different people like work together to make stuff that's amazing as these films. Like, you have your asset creators, you have your avatar makers, your world makers if you do custom sets. I know a lot of filmmakers, they use what's given to them on VRChat. But there are some that make custom worlds specifically for shots, which is crazy to say the least. But it's definitely a crazy thing when you really think about it, and how much Unity and Blender work, everything comes down at the end of the day. So
Oh yeah, yep.
before we go too deep into the films, I guess that's a good question to ask. So do you guys have people in house to like make some of your stuff, or do you have do you, this is a weird way of phrasing it. I guess is your most of your stuff made in house, or do you usually like use like Booth or just find random stuff?
Yeah. So that's one of the benefits of like being in a studio is it's very collaborative, and we kind of establish a like a like a credibility based on like a group. And so we have had a lot of people help us with a lot of different things. So all of our avatars for all the films that are on our channel they're usually like booth bases, like booth avatars that we take and we kind of turn into characters and do all this work. We have quite a few people like that help out with that. NVL Waffles is the person who helps with the avatar dev the most for me. Me and him actually do a lot of work together. I've learned like the more like I guess Unity side of things, and he has experience with Unity and Blender. Peach Bite, who always comes clutch in every single thing dev related, she also helps out with avatars periodically. So avatar side and character side, that's like kind of like all of us. In terms of like the character designs, that's also kind of most of the studio. Like I like designing characters, but other people do as well. And so they'll kind of like put together ideas and inspirations and help me out and help Waffles out with like kind of the choices in the characters' designs and what looks good and what doesn't look good and all sort of stuff. Um, and in terms of like world design, it varies on the film, but certain films require more of a necessity to have custom worlds made. So voicemail, I believe, used zero custom worlds. We used mainly Dr. Morrow's, I believe, is the owner of the organism world. Is that right, Dr. Morrow? Yeah.
Sounds right. We'll put it
So
on the
that
screen.
correction if it's not, but I believe that's the case. And so that film relied solely on like existing VRChat content in house, or sorry, out of house, if you will. But then the Penrose protocol was a mixture. So with the Penrose protocol, the office scene, and partly the train scenes were were quote unquote custom. So the office was custom built by Peach Bite, and the train was actually, we reached out to the world creator and had it altered a little bit to allow for our filming to be a little easier, because like there was a bunch of like UI stuff and all that sort of, and lighting. We also asked for help. And so that was kind of a mixture. Like that's kind of what I traditionally will go for, is like some worlds are in-house, some are not. But the film that I'm personally working on right now, that we're planning on submitting to Raindance this year, I would say 90% of the worlds in that film are custom made for the film specifically. One thing that I like to focus on with studio like worlds that we make is I want to make sure that they're reusable, because if you put a lot of work into a film, or sorry, a world, you kind of want to just get more than one use out of it typically. And so what we did was all these worlds are rebrandable. Like if we need to alter them to use them for another thing, we'll do it. And some worlds that are exterior based, we designed to take place within that city of New Millennia, and so we will be able to reuse them for other films in the future. So in terms of like the world development, like we have a lot of people as well. At the moment, we are working with Peach Bite and Seventh Circle Labs, and specifically with Seventh Circle Labs, Peach Bite, Kadeko are two world creators that we work with a lot. And we also are working with Lucy Liu for this film. And you might recognize their name from because they made the VFI, the Virtual Film Institute, which a lot of people go to. And so they're working with us for this film as well. So yeah, a lot of people in world dev. And there's so much collaboration. Like I could just run on and on and on. We work with like music people, we work with like sound design people, and then we also work with artists now for the film that I'm working on currently.
Hell yeah. No, I mean, you said the best. It could go on and on and on. And that goes with practically any film nowadays. I mean, there's not a lot of people that shot film directed by one single person. It's literally an entire team. It takes a lot of dedication and a lot of passion to do these types of things, to say the least. But yeah, no, I would say, because obviously with some of the later films, there is more. I feel like as time progressed, obviously more things came out. You had more at your disposal. Because obviously after Voicemail, I believe that's when Penrose officially started as its own channel, because that's when Emergence came out, roughly around that time.
Yep.
So
Voicemail was released in the Halloween of the year before Studio Penrose was forming. Man, I forget my timeline too.
2022 was Voicemail. 2023 was Emergence.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. I feel like I'm losing track of time. Like I forget the
Time's
years
all
so
relative.
much now. Yeah, man, I'm like losing myself.
Time's all relative when you're spending it in VR chat. We're already 42 minutes into this episode. Fun fact.
Oh, nice. Okay. I'm losing track of time, yeah.
It's all good. But obviously with Emergence, it was the first, one officially under the Penrose, name. So what kind of made you want to, go with the Emergence side of things?
Yeah. Are you talking about like just the concept, or like what made Emergence?
Sorry. Kind of both. Like what kind of made Emergence, and what kind of brought the concept to life? Like what kind of started Emergence?
Okay. So Emergence's technical conception was in like the summer of whenever year Penrose was formed, 2023, right?
Correct.
And what happened was, after Protocol was finished and released, we were like really enamored with the idea of creating this universe. And I remember the specific like inciting like incident that really started this all. It was me, Spades, and Quinster. Quinster is one of our directors as well, cinematographer. And Spades, he does a lot of like community work. We were like, hey, let's like write some fun lore about characters for fun. April Larson and Lilith Windsor. are the two characters in Penrose Protocol, and we want to give them like a little bit more information. So we wrote more stuff. And we started like building the universe essentially. And more people we pulled on from the team to continue writing this stuff. We were developing the city of New Millennia, and we just went at it for a while, like writing this lore. And we were like, yeah, we don't know what we're gonna do with it, but just for fun, like it's fun to write like a universe, a city, what happens in the city. It's all stuff that you can creatively design yourself. We had a lot of inspiration from things like Arcane was a huge one, and Psychopaths is one for me personally, the anime. And so we developed the world and the universe during that summer. With Emergence specifically, there was with my previous studio, I wanted to try a short film that was more thriller based, but also a little faster and easier to film. One of the complications that we still even run to with our studio is how much content you can actually produce. So filmmaking, in my eyes, is very much like a creative art. And with creative art, you are prone to burnout. And as a creative, you don't want to end up in that position because you kind of lose sight of everything. You kind of lose passion for what you're doing. And so it's always like a challenge on do we like how do we play the YouTube game without destroying, yourself? And so one of the thoughts that we had was try to do some more short form content without it being like soulless, but then also make it a little easier to film. Because you don't want a dead YouTube channel. That was one of the thoughts at the time. And so I pitched the idea of like Emergence, because Emergence, technically speaking, was actually really easy to film. If you look at the film and you compare it to like Penrose Protocol had all these like fight sequence things and like timing you had to do, like explosions, dev work. It's like very technically difficult. But Emergence was a lot more straightforward, more simple. And there were some like weird technical things we did in it, but the majority of the film was more straightforward. And it was also, shorter. And so that was when we were pitching the idea of Emergence. And then I went independent midway through that film's like construction, and that's when Studio Penrose was formed, and we finished Emergence with the studio essentially, and went production into the film and submitted it to Raindance. And so yeah, that's kind of the thought process behind that film, kind of like where it started.
No, fair enough. And yeah, obviously with it being the first one, release, you wanted to make sure that, it did good, at the end of the day, right? Because as that year, because that was the only one you put out in 2023, so with 2024, you obviously had, before Penrose Protocol, you had another film, which was Love Sorrow. So I guess kind of like for the general listening audience, what exactly is Love Sorrow?
Yeah. So Love Sorrow was an interesting one. That is probably the most experimental thing we've done, kind of. So, basically, we were uh, inspired by and approached by some people from Raindance actually about like doing something technically weird, and that was making a 360 film. Because they were like curious, like, do you guys think it's possible? And we were like, we could try, like, why not, right? And so what we did was we wrote this little short, and filmed it in 360 mode, which means that you could watch it in your VR headset, like in the 360 sense. It's not like 360. There's different phrasings for this, but I forgot them for the life of me. But it's not like when you're in a game where you can like walk around and stuff and touch things. It's more
It's a
just like a film
panoramic.
in 360. Yeah. Yep,
Yeah.
exactly. Like if you had like one of those like 360 cameras in real life that, some people like walk around with them and upload them on YouTube and you like look around and stuff. It's like one of those. And
Mm-hmm.
so we kept the idea simple. Basically, the main character from Emergence plays the piano and reminisces about her family. And so we played it to the theme of Love Sorrow because I really just love that classical piece. And I also love the anime Your Lie in April, which is the first time I really got enamored with that piece. And And so we just kind of did something short and simple and more just for fun. Like it was just pure experimental, pure fun. See if it works out. We ran into so many interesting technical difficulties. One is you don't film in VR, you film in desktop. You just like hold your person there with a 360 camera essentially. And the 360 camera is an avatar designed by Voxel, and it was really weird. Like I'm not used to just standing there. I don't even look around. Like you can't look around if you're using that thing. Um, and you don't get the ability to like frame much. Well, you can't frame if you have a 360 view, right? And so it was really weird, but it was a test just to see what we could do. And I don't think there's any VRChat 360 films that have been released ever since. It's very painful, and we now know why.
No, that just just knowing that it is in 360, that hurts me to think, because like I've seen a lot of those videos, right, when it comes to that, like the whole 360 video, and a lot of it's like when you look like in the upper areas and the bottom areas, usually they're just skewed, right? It doesn't
Yep.
look visually appealing. um you know, it, obviously it was like you said, more experimental with the 360 stuff being reached out by Raindance and whatnot. um you know, it, I mean, overall, do you think at the end of the day, do you think there'd be a better way of doing it?
Well, kind of. Yes and no. So the camera itself, the avatar designed by Voxel, that was pretty great. Like it was really nice. It does what you need it to do. So like there's nothing that I would change really there. Uh, the biggest thing that kind of really limits everything is you can't really quick cut. Like you can't change shots quickly in these sort of films, otherwise it'll disorient the viewer like really badly. And so in order to have like more stable footage, you have to have like longer shots. And when you're in VR, like longer shots are often harder to do because like we can't just walk around like, you know, we run into our walls in real life. And so like stuff like that makes it really difficult. Like conversations might be easier to do, but that means you have to like record a conversation like in a long sequence, which is, oh man, that's like really difficult. You can't cut, you know, you really can't cut. Um, and the biggest problem, the hugest limitation that will prevent this thing from ever really taking off until it's addressed is the quality of the footage. Um, Huge learning experience that I didn't know until I did that film is when you record 360 footage, it records it. It basically turns it'll basically produce a video that's like shaped in 1080 1920, you know, ratio. But then it's like kind of warped, and then you put it into Premiere, and then it'll turn it into 360, right? But basically, because you start the film in that 1080 1920, you know, film or video dimension, when you stretch the footage to be 360, it looks horrible. Like if you try to
Mhm.
film a 360 video in 1920 1080 and you just upload it on YouTube, it will look like Minecraft. Like there's just a bunch of pixels everywhere on the screen. And so now here's the deal, you know, there's AI upscaling that you can do and stuff like that. Um, but you run into your next problem. So we took the film, we recorded it in 2K using my monitor, and then we upscaled it to 4K, or yeah, no, I think we tried 8K, it just didn't work, but we did 4K. Now, now you run into what happens if you try to watch that in your headset. It doesn't play smoothly. It, like, spoiler alert. And if you try to like upload it to a world, like to just play in a VRChat world, it'll stutter a lot because that's a lot of like that's a huge video. It's like it's not going to play very smoothly. If you try to watch it in your VR headset standalone and just like go to like virtual desktop or something, you run the same issue. It's laggy. Like my computer is really like well built because, you know, for filming, but it still lags with these videos. So that was the hugest problem we ran into. It ain't gonna work unless you somehow improve the hardware.
No, that's fair. Because obviously, right, you know, there's the 360 films, but there's actually also like, and I don't know the logistics of this, or like how much this has been done because I'm, excuse me, woo, trying not to bleh. But because obviously, there's other types of films out there as well. Like I don't know if it already has been done or if somebody's been working on it, but I know somebody's trying to make like a 3D film using VR chat. Like
Oh.
you like I heard some rumors going around. I don't know the logistics of it, to be honest. It's just a rumor. It hasn't been confirmed or denied, so don't harass me if you're a filmmaker that's doing this. I don't know. I don't know the name of the person, but I've been hearing around the grapevine that somebody is trying to work on something of that sort, which would be really cool, right? Because we have worlds in VR chat that can kind of imitate 3D stuff. But for it to be like on YouTube, like it'll be regular film too, like it's not going to be just 3D. But I don't know. I'd love to see more like immersive, how do I say this? I don't want to say immersive films, right? Because that kind of defeats the whole purpose of it being a film. Um but like, kind of do like 3D would be kind of cool. Um but I don't know. I think one of the things I would love to see is for like a world, a VR chat world, not necessarily like a game world, but like an experience world where you kind of like you experience the characters of a film, let's say a VR chat film, kind of like a 360 type film per se, but as a VR
Mhm.
chat experience. I think that would be really cool. Like it's way above what we're doing right now, but it could be done. You know, as
It's interesting you bring that up. That may or may not be a thing that's in the works, but I can't say much about it.
fair.
So at least know
I'll
that it's being entertained.
Fair enough. I'll allow it. But uh, but no, it's really cool. That I don't know. That's just something that's came to my mind over the past like year of doing the podcast. You know, like it'd be kind of cool if you had like like create your own ending type of way too. What were they called?
Mm-hmm.
Goosebumps type shit. You know what I mean? Like the choose your ending type thing. You like go to certain
Visual
pages.
novels.
Well, yeah, kind of. That's
Kind of. Like a
yeah,
Telltale game.
yeah. Telltale game. That's more modern. Man, I hope I really didn't show my age with the Goosebumps choose your own ending books. That's crazy.
Oh, I know exactly what you're talking about, so I might show mine too.
um, but yeah, no, I think that'd be a really cool like some VR chat world developers got to get on that. I'm just saying. And then come back to me because I want to talk about it. I just want to talk. But it's kind of crazy. But to kind of go back into topic a little bit, because obviously, after Love Sorrow, the Penrose Protocol remaster officially came out. Which first and foremost, congratulations on winning the VRCA awards for 2024.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, trust me. There's. I wish somebody was recording, but there was footage. I wish there was footage of like because we were in PJKT Fest 2024 watching the awards and we're like, oh, who's gonna get it? Like and we saw you guys won and we're glad that you guys had won. Um, it was very this year's VRCAs are stacked. There was a lot of
Oh yeah.
categories, and I said this with I said this with Beyond as well during his episode, but the categories were stacked. Like it was hard to make a proper decision. Like I wish I could have voted for all of them, for real.
Oh yeah. Yep.
Like
Same.
it it was crazy to say the least. But yes, congrats on winning the VRCAs for film. That was very well done. Um,
Thank you.
so I guess kind of one of the things was, we talked about Penrose Protocol a little bit. So obviously, what was it like, kind of um, watching the VRCAs and kind of, realizing that you had won the VRCA award? That's a tongue
Yeah.
twister.
So. Oh yeah. No. No. It was. I'll. Yeah. I guess I'll share the studio's like headspace throughout this. So we always give ourselves imposter syndrome. because like VR film, and you mentioned this earlier, I think, is like kind of niche. It hasn't blossomed like something like machinima, has. And it's very much like there's not a lot of people doing it, and film is different than video content, so like there's like a difference, and so it's still very new. And so we kind of gave ourselves imposter syndrome because in terms of like just even if you consider like the VR chat sphere, I didn't really think a lot of people knew us. Like our channel itself only has like 1,180 subs or something like that. It's pretty small. That's kind of what happens if you start, from ground up. And like when the VRCA was announced, I almost said VRCA awards because I think that'd be redundant.
Yeah,
When the VRCA
it's
was
hard. It's hard sometimes.
when it was announced, we submitted it to the or no, we didn't submit it. It was like a vote system. So I had everyone in the studio like kind of vote for it, and like that was about the end of it. And we got the nomination, and then like from that point, I was just like, oh man, we're not that popular. Like, I don't think anyone's even like not many people have seen this. They might have seen like the original video that was uploaded to the other my previous studio's channel, but I didn't know if they even knew what this one was. And so I didn't really think we'd even have a shot at winning. It was just more just like, hey, we got in. Like it's kind of cool. It's community awards are always like popularity contests essentially. Usually not always with stuff. And so we were just like, roll with the punches. Whatever happens, happens. And when the winner was announced and we won that award, it like actually really surprised me because I was like, there's no way. Like I just don't think a lot of people have seen it. And so the whole studio was kind of the same way. We were like, really? All right, nice, okay, cool. Like we were surprised. Like we weren't expecting it at all. And so it was really refreshing. Like it really helped us, kind of change the mindset that like, hey, people do know about our films even if we don't think that they do. Um, I I've had a very love-hate relationships with numbers. Because when when you do YouTube content, when you do any sort of like content creation that involves like viewers, you often sometimes get entangled with like numbers, like, oh, this video didn't get many views, like, damn, that sucks, but I always tell myself it's not about that. Like it's not all about that. It's important to try your best to get your stuff out there, but not to get like too stuck on the idea of like numbers. Because once you do, you start burning out. And I mentioned that earlier. Like when you play the YouTube game too hard, you start losing sight of what you really wanted to do. And that was kind of a reminder of like, hey, get out of that headspace. So that was kind of the deal with the VRCA.
Oh, fair enough. Well, yeah, I mean, to be fair, it like I said, it was a very stacked category as well as most of the categories. Because there was like, to be honest, we had no idea who was gonna win the convention award, and it was between like Ferality, PJKT, and VCAT. We had no idea.
Yep.
It was literally like it could have went anyway, all of which have amazing communities, backing them. It was up in the air, and ultimately Ferality did win, and it well deserved. Maybe next year, haha. No, but it was crazy. I mean, the game world lineup too. It could have went to anybody. Like,
Yeah.
especially the horror category. The horror category where it was, Terrors of Nowhere, Slash Go, and Smile Room. I was like,
Yep.
all three of
I
which
remember that.
phenomenal games, and it's crazy to think about. It's man. I guess because we are running a little bit out of time. Surprisingly, it's already been over an hour. Post editor, don't hate
Oh
me.
yeah.
So I do want to ask. A couple more. So first on these last couple of questions, because obviously you've been doing filmmaking for a while now. What is one piece of advice you can give to somebody who's interested in making films inside of VRChat?
For sure. I think I repeat the same advice every time when this question's asked. And it's my biggest advice is to try, to do it. A lot of people want to do filmmaking, they want to make videos, but they don't. A lot of people get caught up in the honestly, it's like a lot of imposter syndrome where you don't think that you're able to do it, or it's like it's not good. You absolutely can do it, and you have sorry, you have to like try and make stuff, even if it's not, quote unquote conventionally great. We all start from, somewhere. Like my very first films were terrible, like in terms of like everything film related, and that's completely okay. Like that's where we start off, and even the most recent film I released, it has problems. It's important to give that shot and to try it. And like part of the reason of why we don't have a lot of films and a lot of filmmakers in VR chat is I think people are, nervous to try, or they just don't have the time, or they might get caught up in the complexities of it. It's like just shoot your shot, Like that's my biggest advice. And I guess the next bit of advice that kind of ties along with that kind of like shoot your shot mentality is to not get wrapped up in the intricacies of it. And like so when we make films, we often can get like lost in the sauce, for lack of better phrasing. Like all the details, like this shot's not looking great, or like the script doesn't feel like great, and you start kind of building yourself in this little like circle of I'm not good enough, or like this is too difficult. Scrap that stuff. Scrap that mentality. Just go for it. Not every film is going to be perfect, and especially if you're newer to this sort of thing, it's completely okay to not really know what to do. We also have a community now. The Filmmakers of VRChat is the group, and we give people advice and help and stuff like that. So if people like need help, or they don't know where to start, or they don't know how to start, we offer assistance. Because back when I started, I didn't have any of that. We really didn't have a filmmaking community. And so now we're trying to fill up the gap so that new people who want to try this stuff just go for it, shoot their shots.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you already kind of answered the next question I was going to ask. Darn it! But because I know you are involved with the Filmmakers of VR Chat. So I guess, do you kind of want to explain a little bit more in depth when it comes to the Filmmakers of VR Chat? Like, what exactly you guys
Yeah, of
do?
course. So the Filmmakers of VRChat is kind of like a resource group. It's a collection of just anyone who has interest in filmmaking, whether or not you've released a film or have not released a film, or you want to like release a film, or you want to be part of a team that releases a film. It's a community that's meant for anyone who has that interest to join, learn more about it, ask questions, involve themselves in projects, or just like attend events, because we do have like events and workshops and stuff like that. We've been a little slow with getting those started because it's honestly a lot of work to do these things, and also, we're all filmmakers, so we're like busy. But it's a very welcoming group for that sort of thing, and I find it very good that we're doing this because like the filmmaking community was very, this separated. Like everyone's just kind of doing their own thing. And so having this kind of allows us to know each other and learn more about each other and learn about like what other people do and all sort of stuff. And so it's an open group. If you have any interest in filmmaking, like feel free to, join the group or the Discord. And like obviously if you have any interest in filmmaking but don't know where to start, questions, you can shoot questions there. And I also host what's called like what I call the uh director first film workshop, entirely meant for people who have not like ever done a film before, to kind of see how to do it. I kind of run through like the general, like how to make a simple script, and then like how to use a camera, how to direct people on set, like that sort of thing. And I actually like show people in the workshop like me, and stream my camera like of me like recording stuff, because a lot of people are scared of what they don't know, like myself included. And so seeing like how the filmmaking is done will make it a lot more, simple and less like scary. So I try to host this workshop towards the beginning of the year to encourage people to get into it. But yeah, that's kind of the whole group.
Oh, fair enough. And of course, like, make sure to go check out the filmmakers of VRChat as well. I'll throw their links down in the description as well. Go make sure to check them out. Um, but yeah, no, it's crazy that VRChat now has a community of filmmakers that kind of work together and help each other out. It's a really wholesome thing to say the least. And it's good that there's so much collaboration and camaraderie, because I know a lot of y'all like to goof around sometimes too, because I've knowing
Oh yeah.
knowing some of the times I think I may have been to like 2 or 3 events since finding out about filmmakers of VRChat. Unfortunately, they time perfectly well with other events, and I'm like, damn it. But whenever I do get the chance to be
Yeah.
there for a little bit, um, it's always a good time. Um, but yeah, no, it's definitely cool. Well, Kong, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It was lovely to kind of get to know you more and learn a little bit more about Studio Penrose. It definitely did not feel like an hour and 10 minutes, to say the least. Um, but yeah, no, thank you
Yeah.
so much for coming on.
No, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me. It was great. I love talking about this stuff because it's really fun to talk about, like honestly. And with the niche community like filmmaking, it's like not a lot of people know about this stuff, you know?
No, for sure. Speaking of which, before we do end things off, I do want to give you a spot to tell the camera and tell the general audience where they can find you, Studio Penrose, all the amazing stuff. But yeah, take it away. Tell them where they can find you.
Oh, sure. I'm gonna try to look at the camera. I don't know where it is. Oh, it's right there. I so you can find us on YouTube, Twitter, Blue Sky, and we're gonna get a website up pretty soon here before this year's Raindance. But our YouTube is just Studio Penrose, and then Twitter is Penrose Pictures because some other group took Studio Penrose. It's like a dead account too, which is really funny. And Blue Sky is Studio Penrose, and so you can find us on there. We also have a Discord, discord.gg/Penrose, I think it is. And there you'll find like information about films, casting calls, and all that sort of stuff. If you want to get involved, like we also have that stuff here. So yeah, feel free to join all. And we also have a VR chat group if you're a VR chat player. I don't actually remember the group code. I think it's like PNRS 8996. I
You
might have
got it.
memorized that correctly.
Yeah, you did.
Did
It's
I
right
get it?
above. Yeah,
Nice.
it's above your head. So you got
Oh,
it.
right, right. Yeah, that's a thing. Yeah. So that's another way you can join and kind of see more about our stuff. But yeah, no, that's about it for the socials.
Hell yeah. And of course, as always, all the links will be down in the description on the side, depending on which platform you're on. So make sure to go check out all the descriptions. All the links will be down there. Um, of course, if you are watching, listening, thank you so much for popping in, listening to us. I'll say if you enjoyed what me and Kong talked about, feel free to click that like button down below. Comment down below, what is your favorite Studio Penrose film? And if you haven't watched any, go watch them and then come back to this comment section. But with that, of course, if you are coming back to watch some of the other episodes, why not hit that subscribe button? You're already coming back anyway, or follow button, depending on the platform. There's 9 different platforms this is on. I don't know all the, but it's subscribe or follow, whichever platform you're on. YouTube, subscribe, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or any of those others. Hit that follow button, like it, all that stuff. But I want to thank you all so much for watching, listening. This has been episode 60. Yes, of the Noved Notes podcast. I want to thank you all so much one last time for watching, listening, depending on what platform you're on. Maybe you might be in VFI watching this, who knows? But with that, I will see you in the next episode. Take care and peace.
Take care, y'all.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Noved Squad.